G'day everyone, welcome to the How To Halo Anniversary Battle Rifle tutorial. My name is of course Andrew DFT, and let's get started. So to show you right off the bat, this is what you're going to be achieving by the end of these tutorials. A very cool looking Halo 2 Anniversary Battle Rifle made out of EVA foam. Now to some this might look rather daunting and difficult, but believe me, using this step-by-step process you'll be able to achieve this very easily, and if I was to rate it out of 10, I'd give it only about a 7. It does require a few different techniques to give us some layers, but majority of it is some easy detail that can be replicated for beginners. And of course then all you need to do is take it and simply give it a nice paint job and you've got a lovely, oh nearly destroyed my helmet there, a lovely piece to put on your wall or add to a costume or add to a film, whatever you wish, but nonetheless it looks relatively freaking awesome. And of course for this you'll need templates. Now you can go ahead and grab the templates for free, which I've created myself to best benefit this tutorial, and you can find them in the PDF via the link in the comments section, the description box below. Well, that's enough talking, let's jump right in and get started on this build. Alright, so to kick things off, go ahead and print out the templates required for the tutorial. Downloading the PDF and printing them out on A4 just from a generic printer will do fine, and then assemble them using tape. Once you've done that, we'll cut out the main body of this gun. You can put aside all the other sections. We only need the main core. Once you've got that section done, you can then transfer it onto 3 pieces of EVA foam. It should fit in on a diagonal slope. I've structured it that way so you shouldn't have any issue. You want to transfer 2 of one side and then 1 of another. That way it gives us a left and a right, and they should all match up relatively well. Then what you can do is grab some hot glue or some art or barge cement, whatever you prefer, and glue these 3 together. If there are any imperfections that aren't aligning perfectly, I mean it's going to happen if you're just using a craft knife, it's just human nature to make mistakes like that. All you need to do is clean them up and make it look as best as you can. We will cover these seams up completely, so you don't need to worry about the seams too much because they'll be made flush and make it look like they don't even exist. Now let's start with the detail. So we'll start with the back end of this prop. We'll break apart the template using this little square section here as a good starting point, as it will give you a few little techniques that we'll be repeating multiple times throughout the tutorial. So what we'll do here is we'll cut out this little section that you can see on screen and then place it directly on where it should be on the gun itself. Then using a pen you can use the negative spacing as a template to transfer that little piece on. Then what we'll do is follow that same exact technique and slowly break apart this section of the template and transfer all that detail required into the place, or the real place, on this sheet of foam. Being sure to both do it on the right and the left simultaneously, so that way you don't ever misplace where the templates are being put at any one time. Then all you need to do is add in this little vertical line connecting these 2 pieces and sealing off that section of the design. Moving on, we're going to repeat the process, pretty much. Luckily this part includes some beveling, which is a good technique if you guys are new to it. But otherwise, we'll jump up, do the exact same. We'll cut out that section of the template, transfer it on where it should sit relative to the foam, and then start to break apart the little segments you can see within this little template section here. We'll start off with the base horizontal line, we'll get that added in, and then we'll start taking out these internal segments you can see here. We'll start off with this section just because we know that this will allow us to place it a lot easier than if you were to break apart any of the other sections. Just because the paper I'm using is rather flimsy, it can cause issues when trying to transfer. If you use a more sturdy cardstock or something, you shouldn't have that problem. But for people who are using paper, I recommend following the same process that I'm doing, because this is the best way to get that technique, that template across when the paper might be flimsy and might mess up your lines. But what we're doing now is we're adding this final top line on here, this horizontal one. This is going to become a beveling line. Now with beveling we need to add a depth line which goes into the thickness of the foam. You can see it added about a quarter of the way through here, not necessarily halfway, but you can if you wish, but I've gone with a quarter. Then we're grabbing a nice sharp craft blade and going on a 45-degree angle or thereabouts straight through the foam, so that way it rounds it off and doesn't leave it as a 90-degree solid block like it used to be. On to the next piece. We'll go ahead and start working with this top kind of shoulder section. I'm not too sure what the actual name is, but we'll call it the top shoulder section. We'll grab that, cut it out, place it on so we get this nice horizontal line showing us where this piece is going to sit, and then we'll break off the individual segments on this like we've done with the previous minute or so. We'll start off with this little right square that goes in the corner, transfer that in so that way we know where everything is going to sit relative to itself, and then what we'll do is we'll actually break apart the template in, not half, but into two pieces. Because what we'll do here is we'll actually add in a bunch of guidelines which will become some nice scoring lines giving us detail when we get to it later down the line. Line pun joke. Lol. Moving on. Then what we'll do is we'll grab this second segment and we'll cut out this little piece here. With the guidelines all in place, you should be able to just slot that in and trace it out, no issue. Now what we'll do is we'll grab the other section and we'll cut the base line off because we're going to add this horizontal line in to make it look nice. If you were using styrofoam, you would actually bevel into this section. But because we're using EVA foam, it does make it rather hard, but it will add a nice little piece of detail later on the line when we get to it. But all we're going to do now is continue breaking apart that template, making sure we get all the lines nice and horizontal and symmetrical with one another, because you don't want to have any inconsistencies with your lines because it will just throw off the design, because this is a very long horizontal design where all the lines do kind of go in one direction, so if there was any inconsistencies it would throw the design off. Now adding in that top section line here, you can see we're about to do another bevel technique. So of course with that we'll need to add in the depth line. We can add the depth line in like this. I've gone about halfway through the foam as you can see on the screen. So all we need to do is once we've got that top line and that depth line in, we can go ahead with a that was a weird word, a nice sharp craft blade and cut that section right off like we did before, giving us that nice more rounded section rather than a very 90-degree angle. And we will be moving on to the next section, which we'll do as the ammo charging port. Of course we haven't actually built any mechanisms to allow it to charge, but we will give the impression that it does have something to do with that in this design. To do that, what we'll do is we'll grab the bottom line from the template, cutting it off and actually adding it in. We're going to do some pretty significant beveling here, so make sure that your horizontal line that is pointed on screen is well horizontal and it is sitting there efficiently. Then what we're going to do is add a depth line. Now this depth line is going to go about 3/4 of the way through the foam towards the center. Because we want this to have quite a nice beveling edge, you want to have that extra depth. Now because this is a bit thicker, you are going to have to use quite a bit of force and momentum and control of the blade when cutting through the foam, because EVA foam hates beveling, especially with craft blades. It dulls them out so fast and it just makes it so much harder to cut through. But if you're persistent and you're controlling and you have the momentum, you shouldn't have an issue. Then once you have it nice and smooth, we can go and start putting in the little internal detail. As we can see on the template, it has this little rectangle segment. It might be a bit hard to actually use the template to use as a negative space, so you can just go and freehand that in using a ruler or a sturdy, sharp, or not sharp, but a straight edge. You shouldn't have any issue doing that. Okay, so once that's out of the way, we'll tackle the top ammo detailing scope section. I really need to figure out names for these parts on the gun. Oh, well, we'll do that later. What we'll do is we'll of course cut it out from the template, cut it free from the main body, and then transfer where it's going to sit, continuing along that horizontal line we currently have. And then what we'll do is we'll slowly break apart all these little sections that are within the template, and then use the negative spacing, of course, like we've done, to transfer where they should be. Now I'm going to speed through this a bit because of course it's just the same repetition process, but it's a good repetition process because it helps you as a designer and as someone who's working with foam and working with props to really get a good understanding of how we go about transferring all these details in. Now once we've got all these tiny little pieces put on there and they're all sitting in there nicely, what we'll do is we'll grab all these horizontal lines that you can currently see on the piece of foam, and of course we will transfer those in as need be. Now the handle grip, we'll start off at the bottom of it. We are going to get to a bit of tricky stuff here, but nothing you guys can't handle, given that you've already done some of the beveling techniques before. What we'll do is we'll start off from the bottom left corner here. You can see this weird half semicircle looking piece. What we're going to do is we're going to transfer that on down to the bottom, and then we'll add a depth line about halfway through one of the thicknesses of the foam. So pretty much mimic what you can see on screen here on this display. Then what we're going to do is we're going to use a craft blade, and we're actually going to cut all the way down into that halfway depth point, not all the way through the foam, but to the halfway depth point, and then we're going to come in again and we're actually going to cut out that segment, so that way it gives us a whole new level and a far more intriguing piece of detail. Then once that's out of the way, we can start beveling the actual handle itself to really give this nice curvature to the grip, and it will look a lot more natural and a lot easier to grab. So what you can do is use the template to give it that nice perimeter line, and then of course we'll add a depth line about halfway through one of the thicknesses of the foam. Once you've laid that in, it should trace all the way around this segment that you can see here, and then grab a nice sharp craft blade. Probably at this point you want to change it out, and then go ahead and bevel it. Like I said before, as long as you keep that momentum, keep that control, your blade should be able to cut through that no problem and give you that nice looking edge. Now I'm going to be an ass, and I'm going to ask you to actually tape that section back up, because what we're going to need to do is actually going to use it or recycle it to add in all the handle detail. So what you can do is you can cut out this handle point and then use the negative spacing to mark in these lines you can see here, so that way we can use that negative space we just cut out to actually trace this design around. That makes sense? Nope. If it didn't, rewatch it. If it did, awesome. Let's move on. Once we've laid that in and you've drawn it out, we'll add this little tiny section that you've seen marked on here. This isn't a part of the template. This is something you'll need to add physically, but just pretty much copy that line you can see on screen. What this is going to do is going to allow us to add a beveling edge to the side, but of course we'll need to add that depth line about halfway through one of the thicknesses of the foam like you can see, and then go ahead and bevel off that edge, thus completing both sides of the handle to allow it to be a lot more natural to hold. So that's it. Part 1. Done. So hopefully you guys managed to follow along and you do now have a good understanding on where we're going to go with getting all the detail into this. We've started doing a bunch of this back section and internal hand grip stuff, which is, in my opinion, the hardest part to do. So now with that out of the way, we're going to go ahead and work on more of this bridging detail to really make it look like the iconic battle rifle that we're trying to replicate. But of course, all you need to do now is click on that part 2. Thank you very much for watching, guys. Share the video, like it if you enjoyed the content, and I'll catch you guys later.